Did Jon Jones look great, or was this just a fight between two old heavyweights? I'll be answering all these questions and more in today's video. 5 things we learned from UFC 309, Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic. If it's the first time you've seen a video from this series, we put up these 5 blank boxes at the bottom of the screen, and as we go through the fight, we reveal one thing at a time about what we learnt. But before we get into the 5 things, I do want to do a brief recap on the card itself, in particular the top 3 fights of the night, starting with Bo Nickal against Paul Craig. Bo Nickal defeated Paul Craig by unanimous decision, 30-27 on all 3 judges' scorecards, but it was actually a really close fight. Paul Craig had his moments, landed some nice shots. Bo Nickal likewise, that overhand left was landing time and time again on Paul Craig, and in the 3rd round it finally got through. You could tell Paul Craig was really hurt by it, kept touching his right eye, and Bo Nickal ultimately came out the deserved winner. However, the main talking point after this fight will be that not a single takedown was attempted by Bo Nickal. That's not to say that takedowns, or at least the threat of a takedown, didn't play a massive part in his win, because it did. And I've not heard anyone mention this yet, but Bo Nickal's overhand left is so successful because he dips his head, makes the opponent think that a takedown could be on. And you could see that Paul Craig was biting on this. His hands lowered, chin came up, and Bo Nickal was able to land this shot consistently. This is something we've seen already in his fights, but because his wrestling is so good, fighters don't take the chance. Even though they must know by now that that overhand left is coming, they're just not prepared to take the risk of being taken down by Bo Nickal. They know how strong his grappling game is, how good he is when he gets top position. They just don't want to risk it. They're prepared to take one to the chin to avoid being taken down by Bo Nickal. But that's all I wanted to say about that fight. The next fight, the one we have to talk about, is Charles Oliveira against Michael Chandler, and I want to give full credit to Charles Oliveira here. He paced himself perfectly for the 5 rounds, mixed in the takedowns, looked really sharp on the feet. He looked better than Michael Chandler everywhere. I'm a big Michael Chandler fan. I said beforehand in my prediction video I had to pick an underdog, so I went for Michael Chandler. But in this fight, they just looked levels apart in terms of skill. And it really does pain me to say this, like I say, because I do like Michael Chandler. But Charles Oliveira looked like the wrestler. He was taking Chandler down at will, got the mount, got the body triangle, got the better of the exchanges, but there was one saving grace for Michael Chandler, which was the 5th round. This 5th round for Michael Chandler could be very important for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it reminded everyone that this guy is just a natural born entertainer. Even though Charles Oliveira had his back, he put on a show for the fans in the middle of the octagon, leaping backwards, had the fans off their feet. He had the better of the exchanges in the 5th round. His leaping left hook, great right hands down the middle, they were hurting Charles Oliveira. You could tell that Charles Oliveira was stunned by a couple of them, and Chandler was coming on really strong. This is so important, not just to remind everyone that Michael Chandler is an entertainer, he's must-watch TV, even though he's lost 3 times now at Madison Square Garden, you have to watch Michael Chandler fights. The second reason why it was so important for Chandler to come on so strong in that 5th round is because it saved the Conor McGregor fight. I truly believe that. If it had just been complete domination start to finish by Charles Oliveira, which it almost was, then I think the Conor McGregor interest would have gone out the window. But the fact that he did have the fans on their feet at the end, everyone was cheering him, chants of USA, people will want to see Conor McGregor against Michael Chandler. Even if you don't think Chandler will win, even if you weren't happy seeing him with his back against the fence, swinging blindly, knocking himself off his own feet, swinging so hard, people are still going to want to see Conor McGregor against Michael Chandler. You know it's going to be cinema, you know it's going to be box office. There is going to be a thirst for this fight because of how strong Chandler came on in the 5th round. There are highlights that you can take from that 5th round to argue that the fight was closer than it actually was. You know how good the marketing can be. They're going to really sell this one. I truly believe that that 5th round could have saved Conor McGregor against Michael Chandler. And if McGregor does come back, I still think that's the fight we're going to see. But anyway, you're here for the 5 things that we learned from Jon Jones against Stipe Miocic. So let's talk about the main event. That 1st round was vintage Jon Jones. The trip was just beautiful, completely caught Stipe cold, and then the ground and pound. Jon Jones's ground and pound is so good, but it was only Stipe's toughness that got him to the end of that first round. I've got no idea how Stipe wasn't covered in cuts. I think he only had one from what was the best part of 3 minutes of ground and pound, but all credit to Stipe for his toughness. The second round was fairly cagey, some nice work from Jon Jones to the body. Stipe got a couple of shots, but Jon was moving with it a lot. He wasn't really in any danger. And then the third round, similarly, a bit of back and forth. Jon still getting the best of the work, and that spinning back kick to finish. Just vintage Jon Jones. To be able to do that at heavyweight, despite all the criticism that he's received going into this fight, so much of the talk all fight week has been about everything apart from this fight when it comes to Jon Jones. Talking about Tom Aspinall, Alex Pereira, legacy. And I found the dismissal of Stipe to be quite disrespectful, given how great a champion Stipe was, how much he's done for the sport, and the fact that there are unknowables about both fighters heading into that fight. However, I did turn out to be quite wrong with that. It was one-way traffic. Jon Jones dominated the fight. He was never really in any danger, and he was able to get Stipe out of there. So moving on to the first thing that we learned from this fight, it's that Jon Jones continues his legacy of beating fighters at what they do best. Stipe Miocic is such a well-rounded fighter, but his best performances arguably came against DC in the rematches. And what did he do so well against DC? He was adapting throughout the fight, damaging DC to the body and eventually getting him out of there. Now, Stipe is such a juggernaut. He walks forwards, his hands fairly low, and Jon Jones recognised early on that shots to the head just aren't going to do it. They're not going to damage Stipe. He's just like a brick wall. You can hit him so many times. That ground and pound at the end of the first round is evidence of that. Those shots would have put out 99.9% of fighters, but Jon Jones recognised that he's going to have to work the body. We saw the front kicks to Stipe's body that really got a big reaction from him, far more so than anything that he did to the head. And Jon Jones identified, this is the area that I need to target. I'll keep working the jab, and his jab, both his left-hand jab from orthodox and right-hand jab from southpaw, was getting a lot of success from Stipe, getting him to raise his hands, and that allowed him to attack the body with really nice front kick, really nice body kicks, and it ultimately set up the finish at the end of the third round. Jon Jones' fight IQ is just off the scale, and he's got a history of beating fighters at what they do best. He took down Daniel Cormier, he's beaten jiu-jitsu guys at grappling, strikers at striking, and in this fight, I'm not sure if it was to make a point or just because, as we just said, it was the area that he identified, but he knew that the weakness in Stipe was to his body. That's a car alarm going off, but we're going to continue. The weakness to Stipe is to his body. He caught him really nice with a body kick early on, as we just mentioned, got that read, and then he knew that this was the area to target. And that spinning back kick at the end of the third round at heavyweight, let's not understate or undersell how impressive that is for a heavyweight to do, especially a guy coming up in weight classes where it's not natural for him to hold this much weight. Jon Jones making the calculations, beating Stipe at what Stipe does best is the first thing that we learnt in this fight. I think the second thing that we learnt in this fight was evidenced by the fact that Stipe retired immediately afterwards, is that Stipe just looked old. He looked tentative, he looked slow, and he offered very little coming back to Jon Jones. After the first round, you could see him walking back to his corner. He looked shell-shocked. And how can you blame him? He'd just gone through 3.5 minutes of vicious ground and pound from the best ground and pounder in UFC history, and he had no answer for it. He tried to turn onto his front to crawl up, stand up, but Jon Jones just flattened him out, kept him down there, kept raining down huge elbows, huge shots, which would have knocked out a lesser fighter, a less tougher fighter than Stipe Miocic. Stipe, he's already built a legacy for himself, the greatest heavyweight to ever do it in the UFC. He's so tough, he's got so many weapons himself, but against an all-time great like Jon Jones, he looked normal, he looked old, he looked slow. He offered nothing really coming back to Jon Jones. As soon as Jon started the body kicks, Stipe's offerings were really slim. There was one moment in either the second or the third round where Jon clipped him with a really nice right hand, had Stipe moving backwards, and Stipe countered with a really nice right hand of his own. It was probably the best shot in the fight, but it didn't really get much attention on the commentary. But it's just a testament to how good Jon Jones' chin is, even at heavyweight, that he barely flinched. Stipe, he had his time. He was a great champion. But at 42 years old, this is kind of what we were all worried about. Seeing Stipe continuing to take punishment, not offering much back, and ultimately his time is now past. So Stipe, great champion, fantastic career, congratulations, enjoy your retirement, and you're an amazing example of what a UFC fighter should be like. Volunteering as a fireman despite probably having millions in the bank, you've got a legacy in the sport, guaranteed Hall of Famer, but your time in the sport is now done. So the second thing we learned from this fight is that Stipe's time in the UFC is over. Again, this is no disrespect, he retired himself, but his time is over. And this kind of relates to the third thing that I want to talk about here, and it's the optics of this fight. And it's very much subjective, based on your own perspective, but was this a fight just between two old heavyweights? A legacy fight where a belt happened to be on the line, rather than two of the best heavyweights out there? Now, we know with the Tom Aspinall conversation and potential Alex Pereira moving up to heavyweight that there are dangerous fighters out there, definitely more dangerous than Stipe Miocic. And we've already established that Stipe looked old, but did Jon look old too? It's kind of hard to argue that based on the first round. Yes, the first minute was slow. It was a bit of a feeling out process. Jon did get caught a couple of times, but then the takedown and 3.5 minutes of intense, high-paced ground and pound. That's not a fighter who's looking old. The argument that Jon looked old can definitely be made in the second round. That was a much slower pace. Stipe looked really slow and Jon failed to capitalise on that in the second round. But could he have just been taking a round off after such a high-paced 10-8 round that the first round was? And more to the point, was that a slower Jon Jones than what we saw against Dominic Reyes or Thiago Santos? I'm not too sure. Gone are the days when he was coming up in his early 20s where he'd start a fight with a flying knee, a flying kick. He's never really been a Khamzat Chimaev character to explode straight away and just trying to get a fighter out of there. So I think based on that, I have seen a couple of takes saying that the second round he looked really old. But yes, he's 37, he's going to look older. But I wasn't too concerned. Like I said, I don't think too many of the shots were getting through clean. Again, I don't want to make out as though there was nothing bad we saw in his performance. We have seen him slow down a bit. But is it any slower than his later performances at light heavyweight? I'm not convinced either way. And then when it comes to the conversation about age, we need to look at the finish. All fights are made up of moments, and the moment of this fight, other than a couple of the elbows that seemed to do real damage at the end of the first round, the moment of this fight was the finish, the spinning back kick, and to do that, again, upper weight class, 37 years old at heavyweight, it's really impressive. That would really detract from the argument that this is purely an old heavyweight fight. Even his cartwheel during his ring walk when he gets into the octagon, things like that give you the idea that this is just a pure athlete. I'm not making the argument that 37-year-old Jon Jones is still in his prime. I think that the later fights in his light heavyweight career showed that he's not still in his prime. But by no means did I see a has-been there, someone who's got nothing left in the tank, someone who can't go toe-to-toe with Tom Aspinall. I think that would be a really competitive fight. Tom Aspinall, based on natural size and just the short time that he's been able to get opponents out of there, I think would make Aspinall the favourite. But still, I don't think this is purely a fight between two old heavyweights. I think it's a fight between, yes, one old heavyweight, but also a heavyweight who might be past his prime, but is still elite in every aspect of the sport and able to mix with the very best. So the third thing that we learned is that this wasn't simply a fight between two old heavyweights. Jon Jones isn't at his prime anymore, but he's still an elite fighter, the very best to ever do it, and a threat for anyone coming to try and take his belt at heavyweight. Before we move on to the fourth thing that we learned, guys, please do subscribe, like the video. I'm sure there's going to be quite a lot of criticism because I am praising Jon Jones so much, but I've also been one of his critics, bear in mind. I think that he should still be fighting the best, but this is the fight that we've got. This is the fight that we need to analyse. Moving on to the fourth thing that we learned from this fight, and again, this one is more up for debate, and it's a question of legacy. What did this fight do for Jon Jones' legacy? Jon Jones just beat the best heavyweight in UFC history. Forget the fact that it's a 42-year-old Stipe Miocic, he beat the best heavyweight in UFC history. Now, in years to come, when you look back at the record of Jon Jones, the people that he beat, you don't necessarily connect the dots to the extent where you think this guy was a bit old, this guy was a bit before his prime. You just look at the names. And to have Stipe Miocic on your record as a W is undoubtedly a big legacy win for Jon Jones. And what's more, it's actually more of a legacy fight at this point than Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall's been unbelievable since entering the sport. He's beaten people in record time. His time in the octagon is just ridiculous. when you compare it to the people that he's fought, but he's still not a legacy fighter. He hasn't unified the heavyweight division. I know that is Jon Jones' fault largely, but still, he hasn't been there and done it like Stipe Miocic has. So this fight was big for Jon Jones' legacy. The reason he wanted this fight in the first place was for legacy. And by beating Stipe Miocic, by stopping Stipe Miocic, it's hard to argue that this wasn't a big win for Jon Jones' legacy. Whether you like it or not, this is another big W for Jon Jones. Now, finally, the fifth thing that we learnt in this fight is what's next, or more importantly, who's next. Joe Rogan asked the question that everyone wanted to know at the end of the fight. People were looking forward to the post-fight speech almost as much as the fight itself. He was asked, who do you want next? What do you want next? Jon Jones, he praised his Lord and Saviour Jesus Christ. You know, everyone in the arena respected that. It was a good moment for him personally to get across his faith to the audience. But Joe Rogan went back, asked him afterwards, is Tom Aspinall next? To which Jon Jones responded, I've got some negotiating to do with Hunter Campbell, Dana White. We'll have that conversation. Basically, if the money's right, I'll take the fight. He then went on in the post-fight press conference to contradict his statement slightly, saying it's Alex Pereira or retirement. But is this just all public negotiation? That's been the big debate going into it. If it was public negotiation, then he's done a genius move because he's hyped up the Tom Aspinall-Jon Jones fight more than any other fight. The Alex Pereira fight, which is arguably bigger because they're both big names, Jon Jones and Alex Pereira. Tom Aspinall isn't quite there yet. Jon Jones has propelled Tom Aspinall's name to almost the same level purely because of the dismissal of that fight. So if he's done this as a marketing ploy, then it's genius. And I really hope we get to see this fight next. However, what do I think is more likely? Tom Aspinall against Jon Jones or Alex Pereira against Jon Jones? Now, for the last month, I've been saying that the Alex Pereira fight is the next fight. It's going to happen next summer. International Fight Week, something like that. Two of the biggest names in the sport. Now I'm not too sure. Dana White seems convinced that he wants Jon Jones against Tom Aspinall to be next. He's not going to put forward the Alex Pereira fight. But you know how it is in the UFC. Things that are said in the post-fight press conference rarely come to be true. And we could see Jon Jones against Tom Aspinall next. I think the next few weeks will be really telling. We'll see if there's any fight news that comes out from the Tom Aspinall camp. I'm sure that he'll want to stay active. His activity has been so key for his development. We've seen him get better and better and better through regular activity since entering the UFC. And if he has the opportunity to fight Jon Jones, fight the greatest of all time, and unify the heavyweight division, that would be a fight that everyone wants to see. I can also understand why Jon Jones wouldn't want to take that fight. As we said, he's not over the hill, he's not finished, but he is past his prime. Does he want a young up-and-comer to try and take his legacy from him? Couple that with the fact that if Alex Pereira then goes up to heavyweight and beats Tom Aspinall, he could be leapfrogged in the greatest of all time conversation. There's a lot of things to consider for Jon Jones, but I think ultimately, if the price is right, he will take the fight. I think it's quite as simple as that. Let me know if you agree with these 5 things. We've said number 1, Jon Jones has continued his legacy, beating fighters at what they do best. 2, Stipe, absolute legend of the game. He's retired. He's not coming back. Number 3, I'm arguing that this wasn't just a fight between 2 old heavyweights. It was one old heavyweight and one elite heavyweight. Maybe not in his prime, but still an elite heavyweight. The 4th thing that we learned was that despite the controversy, beating Stipe Miocic was yet another chapter in the legacy of Jon Jones. And finally, the 5th thing that we learned is who is next. There's still a big question mark over that. Either Alex Pereira or Tom Aspinall. Before I was leaning towards Alex Pereira, now I think it's in the balance 50-50. How much is Dana prepared to pay to see the heavyweight unification fight? Let me know what you think, guys. Hope you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys later.